It's Megyn Kelly time. Now we're 7 days away from the US midterm elections, which will provide a huge boost for either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But the whole race has been shaken up by the brutal attack on the husband of Nancy Pelosi. The attacker, David DePape, had been planning to hold the Speaker of the House of Representatives hostage at the couple's San Francisco home. According to a criminal complaint filed by an FBI agent, DePape, now facing federal charges of assault and attempted kidnapping, had allegedly planned to break into the US politician's home and break her kneecaps over, quote, lies told by the Democrat Party. Of course, left-wing commentators and publications have tried exploiting this isolated attack to condemn the American right as a whole ahead of those crucial votes. But is it really as straightforward as that? Well, Megyn Kelly is going to weigh on that in just a moment. But Megyn, first up, you're obviously a friend of mine, and I am so devastated to hear the news about the death of your sister, Suzanne. So from me and from the whole Dan Wootton Tonight family here in the UK, we're sending you lots of love.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you. And thanks to your audience as well. It's definitely been a rough couple of weeks, but we're getting through it. And, my mom is our strong family matriarch, and she's still got her sense of humor. So that's what we need. That's key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, Megyn, I mean, you're obviously straight back to work because this is, and this is a huge political moment in the US. Do you feel like this attack on Pelosi's husband could change the course of the midterms at all?
Absolutely not. But the Democrats are trying to make this their October surprise. They're trying to turn this into, like, you see how awful these Republicans are? You can't vote for them. This is January 6th, part 2, which is such a lie. If you had waited 1 week, this lunatic would have attacked somebody else based on a different set of politics. He was a BLM supporter. He had an LGBTQ flag in his window. He was sleeping on a school bus 3 nights out of 7. He was married or the longtime boyfriend of some woman who was convicted of molesting and harming a 14-year-old boy who was the well-known nudist in San Francisco. I guess something he sometimes dabbled in as well. She said his politics were left-wing and that he was a molester of the 2 children they shared together. Recently, I guess he found QAnon interesting and decided to sign on to some of the January 6th bizarre theories. But honestly, 2 more minutes and he would have been attacking somebody from the Green Party. Who knows, right? Turns out he was in the country illegally. He was a homeless drug addict. The guy was a lunatic who believed in fairies, who had like some sort of image of himself in a unicorn suit on his website. He believed for a year that he was Jesus. I mean, I could go on. And so only now did the Democrats say, oh, well, that's all irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's the Republican rhetoric is what made him do it. Really? Because when the lunatic guy who was going to kill Brett Kavanaugh, our Supreme Court justice, who was one of the votes to overturn Roe versus Wade, when that guy who had severe mental problems showed up at Kavanaugh's house with zip ties and weapons and some of this same problematic stuff in a bag, you told us that, oh, he's a nutcase, move on. Oh, what? What do you mean? We can't do that in this case? They're desperate. All they've had all along, Dan, has been abortion, 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 abortion. And then it's threat to democracy, January 6th. None of it is working. They're dying in the polls. So this is just their latest effort. And when I tell you they're dying in the polls, let me tell you, it's devastating for them. There's a reason they're latching on.
Really? So, OK, so Megyn, let's just play it forward then and assume that there is a big win for the Republicans in the midterms. Does that make the chances of Donald Trump back in the White House ever stronger?
Not necessarily, because, typically the party that's out of power is irritated. The independents who voted for the party that's in power have some buyer's remorse a couple of years into the term and start to say, well, I want divided government. And that's why typically in virtually every midterm election, it's better for the party who's out of power. You look at the United States historically. So I don't know. Once you get Republicans in there, which you undoubtedly will in the House and perhaps the Senate, and they start doing different things that become controversial that the left-wing press uniformly writes bad things about, the tide could swing again. If I were Donald Trump thinking about what's good for me, I might vote for the Democrats to hold complete power. And then for me to try to swoop in a few years later as the savior. Now what you need is GOP rule again.
Interesting, very interesting theory, Megyn, because obviously while you've been off, it has been so shocking watching Joe Biden nearly falling asleep in interviews while insisting he's going to run for a second term. What are folk within the Democratic Party saying, Megyn? Do they really want him to do that, or are they trying to find a way to usher him off the stage before the next
They do not want
election?
him to do that. And I think as soon as these midterms are over, we're going to start to see the opinion pieces on how he's too old. Just the other day, it was yesterday, I think he said, oh, these Republicans, they're going to try to repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And, we tried to stop that before. We went to all 54 states. Now, I'm going to guess even your audience that's not American knows there are only 50. There's not 54. Every day, Dan, something happens where he says something and he wanders. And the other day you had the vice president trying to, no, over here, good for the love of God. He can't be corralled. He can't be controlled, and he can't govern. I think everybody sees it. So they're holding on right now because they don't have another great option. Once these midterms are over, I think it's going to be whoosh, fresh slate. Who do we get? Gavin Newsom, Pete Buttigieg, they think our transportation secretary, who's about 4 years old, is their, great
If he's
hope.
the answer, what is the question? If Mayor Pete is the answer, my goodness, they're answering the wrong question. Megyn, I wanted to talk to you quickly about Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor. I mean, he is expected to romp home. Does that make him the biggest potential threat to Trump within the Republican Party?
Oh, definitely. He is, and he has been. But I mean, I've said before, no one can take down Trump. It's not going to happen. Trump's 30% of the GOP is not going to vote for Ron DeSantis unless Trump blesses it. So DeSantis can become the GOP nominee if Trump gets out of the way, if Trump decides he wants somebody else to do it and he doesn't want to go through this nonsense again. But I firmly believe there is no way Ron DeSantis can wrest the nomination from Donald Trump. And if somehow he managed to, the Trump loyalists would not vote for Ron DeSantis in a general election. They would spoil the vote and the Democrat would win. So I just don't think there's any way forward for the Republican Party if Trump decides he wants it other than to nominate Trump.
Absolutely fascinating. Well, Megyn, it is great to have you back. It's going to be really interesting following your coverage of the US midterms. Of course, for US political junkies like me, this is a bit like the Super Bowl, right? Super Bowl time.
Yeah, one more week to go.
But it only comes once every couple of years. And Megyn, lots of love to your mum and your whole family. That was Megyn Kelly, top US journalist, host of the Megyn Kelly Show. It is, of course, available on Sirius XM in the US as well as YouTube and as a podcast for international fans. It is a must listen during this election season.